Let's get right into it. Renting versus buying, the real math. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to tackle what is probably the ultimate personal finance debate. Is renting really just throwing your money away? You know the drill. It's the exact phrase we hear at every family gathering, right? We're constantly told that buying a house is absolutely always the smartest financial move you can make. End of story. But as we start to peel back the layers on the actual math today, you're going to see that the reality is way more complex. And honestly, it's a whole lot more fascinating than that conventional wisdom wants you to believe. To really ground this complex math in reality, our source material introduces us to two incredibly relatable guys. Let's meet Ryan and Steve. Now, financially speaking, these two are identical clones. They're both 32 years old, they both make exactly $80,000 a year, and through some serious sheer discipline, we're talking skipping the expensive streaming subscriptions and happily eating generic cereal, they have both managed to save up exactly $80,000. But behaviorally, they are complete opposites. Ryan craves stability. He wants a backyard, a dog, a permanent address. Steve, on the flip side, strictly values flexibility. He wants options. And frankly, the mere thought of committing to a 30-year zip code gives him hives. So naturally, these distinct personalities lead them to completely different lifestyle decisions. Ryan heads out house hunting and ultimately decides to buy a 3-bedroom home for $350,000. To pull this off, he puts down exactly 20%. And just like that, boom, a massive $70,000 of his hard-earned savings is locked up right out of the gate. But here is where the hidden, often ignored costs of buying start to hit really hard. Because Ryan doesn't just pay that down payment. He gets hit with closing costs, lender fees, title fees, inspections, the whole shebang. On a $350,000 home, that easily tacks on another $10,000. So think about this. Before Ryan has even unpacked a single cardboard box, his entire $80,000 life savings is completely wiped out. It is fully locked into the concrete, the drywall, and the paperwork of this property. Okay, so how does this actually play out month to month? Well, Ryan takes out a standard 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%. When you lump his mortgage, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and a 1% maintenance budget all together, his total monthly housing cost lands at about $2,653. Meanwhile, Steve decides to rent a highly comparable house just down the street for only $2,000 a month. This gives Steve a pretty massive $653 advantage every single month. And here's the kicker. Instead of taking that extra cash and blowing it on a fancy trip to Thailand, Steve rigorously invests it. He takes that monthly difference plus his fully intact $80,000 savings and dumps it straight into a broad stock market index fund. The early years of homeownership reveal a pretty surprising truth. People absolutely love to tell Steve that he's throwing $2,000 a month away. But let's look at Ryan. In month 1, out of his $2,653 payment, only about $230 actually goes toward building equity. The other $2,400 plus, it literally just vanishes into thin air, going toward mortgage interest, taxes, and insurance. As our source so brilliantly puts it, pretending those sunk costs are somehow investments is just creative accounting. So the stage is perfectly set. We've got Ryan, the homeowner, on one side, and Steve, the renter/investor, on the other. We're going to use the exact math straight from our source to map their parallel financial journeys over the next 2 decades. We're tracking every rent hike, every property tax bill, and every market return. Let's see what happens. Fast forward to our year 3 check-in, and the scorecard is incredibly tight. Ryan's home has appreciated nicely, giving him roughly $112,000 to $123,000 in home equity. But remember, he also had to shell out cold, hard cash when his water heater suddenly broke on a Saturday morning. Steve, on the other hand, hasn't had to fix a single leaky pipe. His initial $80,000 plus his relentless $653 monthly contributions have just been compounding away in the market, pushing his liquid portfolio to around $130,000. So surprisingly enough, at year 3, Steve is actually slightly ahead in overall wealth. And the crazy part? He could pack up and move to a completely new city tomorrow if he wanted to. But don't celebrate for Steve just yet, because he's got a formidable antagonist in this story. Compound inflation. See, while Ryan's principal and interest payments are safely locked in for 30 years, Steve's landlord is a huge fan of compound growth. Rent naturally creeps up by about 3% every single year. That initial $2,000 becomes $2,060, then $2,122. Slowly but very surely, that $653 monthly savings advantage that Steve absolutely relies on to build his wealth, it begins to shrink. Now let's jump ahead to year 10. The guys are 42 years old now. Ryan has been diligently chipping away at his mortgage, and thanks to property appreciation, he's sitting on anywhere from $230,000 to $278,000 in home equity. He officially owns half the bricks in his house. Awesome. Steve has kept his head down, kept investing, and his portfolio is now worth a very impressive $290,000. So technically, Steve is still winning in liquid assets, but the entire dynamic is shifting under his feet. Because of that relentless inflation, Steve's rent is now approaching $2,700 a month, which is actually more than Ryan's fixed housing cost. Time, as it turns out, is starting to really work in the homeowner's favor. Let's jump ahead one more decade to year 20. The guys are now 52 years old. And here is the massive, jaw-dropping reveal for Steve, our career renter. $750,000. By keeping his original $80,000 in the market and consistently, stubbornly investing the monthly difference, even as that difference got smaller and smaller over the years, Steve's wealth has completely exploded. The guy society swore was just throwing his money away, he just pulled off a massive financial victory. But when we look at the final 20-year scorecard, it brings a pretty harsh reality check for both sides of the aisle. Steve is sitting on a highly liquid $750,000. Ryan's home equity is definitely substantial, up to $661,000, but he is trailing Steve on pure net worth. However, Steve's on-paper victory comes with a huge catch. After 20 long years of rent hikes, Steve is now paying a staggering $3,600 a month just to keep a roof over his head, and that rent payment has absolutely no finish line. Meanwhile, Ryan is just 10 short years away from completely eliminating his mortgage payment forever. So the absolute most crucial point of all of this is this. We cannot just look at these numbers in a vacuum. We have to talk about the behavioral reality. Spreadsheets are great because they assume absolute perfection, but humans, we are messy, complicated creatures. Steve's victory required downright robotic discipline. Every single time the market crashed 30%, he had to swallow his fear and keep investing. Every time he wanted a nicer car or a lavish holiday, he had to say no and buy index funds instead. Ryan, conversely, tapped into a uniquely powerful tool, forced savings. Ryan never had to wake up and consciously choose to build equity every month. The bank made that choice for him the second they demanded that mortgage payment. We also have to take a hard look at how they manage risk. Steve's wealth is beautifully spread out across a heavily diversified portfolio of thousands of companies all over the world. If one specific sector crashes, he's insulated. Ryan, on the other hand, took on massive concentration risk. Think about it. His entire net worth is tied up in one single house on one single street in one single city. If the local economy tanks or a major employer suddenly leaves town, Ryan's wealth is going to tank right along with it. Furthermore, Ryan's wealth is incredibly stubborn. Home equity is real wealth for sure, but you cannot easily spend it. If Ryan suddenly needs cash for a medical emergency or a major lifestyle change, he can't just sell off 8% of his kitchen to fund it, right? He has to jump through massive hoops, refinancing, taking out a loan, or selling the entire house, which triggers huge transaction costs and agent fees. Buying a house fundamentally decreases your mobility and absolutely changes you to ongoing unpredictable maintenance costs. Okay, so how do you actually take all this math and apply it to your own life? Well, our source synthesizes the numbers into a really clear decision framework. Step 1 is assessing your time horizon. Because of the massive sunk costs of buying, those closing fees, the agent commissions, the heavily front-loaded mortgage interest, you generally need to stay in a home for at least 7 to 10 years just to break even against renting. If you buy a place and move in year 3, you're almost certainly going to lose money. Step 2 is calculating the price-to-rent ratio for your specific housing market. The math on this is beautifully simple. You just take the purchase price of the home you want, and you divide it by the annual cost of renting a similar home in that exact same neighborhood. In our Ryan and Steve scenario, we divide the $350,000 house by the $24,000 annual rent. That gives us a ratio of 14.6. Generally speaking, as that ratio creeps up and starts pushing past 20, it becomes mathematically very, very difficult to justify buying, and renting becomes highly competitive. The overarching lesson here is that personal finance is rarely about finding one perfect, universal, silver bullet strategy. It is entirely about understanding trade-offs. Neither Ryan nor Steve was automatically smart, and neither was automatically stupid. Ryan knowingly traded his mobility and his liquidity for leveraged stability and long-term control over his environment. Steve traded housing certainty for ultimate flexibility and the sheer raw power of liquid market compounding. So before you sit down and sign a 30-year legal document, You need to be brutally honest with yourself. How long are you actually going to stay? If you crave flexibility, if your career might randomly pull you across the country, or if you simply just don't know what you want your life to look like in 5 years, forcing yourself into homeownership just because society told you to could financially punish you. Transaction costs, my friends, are unforgiving. And finally, we arrive at the ultimate behavioral test. If you run the numbers and decide the math actually favors renting in your city, you have to ask yourself this one provocative question. Will you genuinely invest the difference? Because let's be real, if you rent for 20 years to save money, but you spend all those savings on lifestyle upgrades instead of index funds, the renter's advantage completely evaporates. The winner of this debate isn't the person who signs a lease or the person who signs a mortgage. It's the person who consistently executes their financial discipline long after the ink is dry. So, which path requires the discipline you actually possess? Take some time and think about that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.